I didn't say a word. Not one. I just stood there at the end of that long dining table, holding a casserole dish with both hands, while my brother's voice carried across the room like he was making a toast. Everyone, this is my sister. She cleans houses for a living. He laughed. His Beyoncé laughed. My mother smiled into her wineglass, and 23 people went completely silent. My name is Adele Bouchard. I'm 31 years old. I live in Mississauga, and up until about 14 months ago, I believed, truly believed, that if I just worked hard enough, quietly enough, without making a fuss, my family would eventually see me. I was wrong, but I wasn't wrong in the way I expected to be. Let me start from the beginning, because the dinner table moment, the one that changed everything, didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the result of years of something I didn't even have a name for until I was well into my 20s. My therapist later called it parentification adjacent dismissal. I just called it being the second kid. My brother is 4 years older than me. His name is, well, I'll call him my brother throughout. Because honestly, he doesn't deserve the credit of being named in this story. He was the kind of kid who won everything. Spelling bees, hockey tournaments, the science fair 3 years running. My parents put his trophies on the mantel above the fireplace. They had a dedicated shelf. A literal dedicated shelf. I wasn't bad at things. I just wasn't him. When I was 12, I won 3rd place in a regional art competition. My mother framed the certificate, but she put it in the hallway bathroom, not the living room. When I pointed it out, she said, "There's more room for it in there, sweetheart." She wasn't being cruel. That's the thing that took me the longest to understand. She genuinely didn't see what she was doing. My brother went to Western on a partial scholarship. Business administration. My parents threw him a party in the backyard with a cake that had a little fondant briefcase on top. When I graduated high school, we went out for dinner. My parents, my brother and me, at a Swiss chalet. My mother ordered the quarter chicken. I had the half. My brother talked the entire meal about his first year at university. I didn't go to university right away. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was honest about that, and my parents, in the kindest, most well-meaning, most absolutely devastating way possible, treated that uncertainty like a personality flaw. "You'll figure it out," my father said, which sounds supportive but wasn't, the way he said it. "Your brother always knew what he wanted," my mother said, which is the kind of sentence that doesn't need a follow-up to do its damage. I moved into a basement apartment in Brampton when I was 19. I got a job cleaning offices at night through a staffing agency. It paid decently, it fit around the college courses I started taking part-time, business administration, ironically, and I didn't tell anyone in my family what I did for a living, because I already knew what they'd say without them saying it. I cleaned offices for 2 years. I learned things in those 2 years that I've never learned anywhere else. I learned how businesses actually run, not the theory, the reality. I learned which offices were growing and which were contracting just by the trash they generated. I learned that the people who owned buildings always needed the people who maintained them, and that the people who maintained them were almost always invisible, and that being invisible could be an advantage if you paid attention. I started my own cleaning company when I was 23. Not a big announcement, not a party. I registered the business with the province, got my insurance, printed some cards and started making calls. I named it Borealis Cleaning Services because I liked the idea of something brilliant appearing in the dark. By the time I was 26, I had 11 contracts, office buildings, 2 medical clinics, a small private school in Oakville. I had 4 employees. I had a client who referred me to another client who referred me to another. And I had learned, slowly and carefully, how to price my services so I was actually making money and not just covering costs. I didn't tell my family any of this. I'm not sure exactly when I made that decision. It wasn't one moment. It was more like I kept waiting for the right time to bring it up. And the right time kept not coming, and eventually I realized I'd been holding this whole piece of my life away from them for so long that sharing it felt less like good news and more like a reveal. And something in me wanted to wait for a moment when it mattered, when it would land correctly, when they would actually hear it. I didn't know the moment would come the way it did. My brother got engaged in October. Her name is, I'll call her his fiancée. She's perfectly nice. I have nothing against her. She's an accountant. She grew up in Waterloo. She has a very organised kitchen and a clear discomfort with silences. They'd been together for 2 years. My parents loved her immediately, visibly, in a way that made me feel something I'm not proud of. Not jealousy exactly, more like a low-grade grief for something I couldn't name. They decided to have the engagement dinner at my parents' house in Burlington. My mother cooked for 3 days. My father borrowed folding tables from the church to extend the dining room. They invited my mother's 2 sisters and their husbands, my brother's friends from university, his fiancée's parents and her older sister, some family friends I've known since I was a child, my brother's colleagues from the firm he'd been at for 2 years, 23 people plus me. I drove out from Mississauga on a Saturday afternoon in late November, the 4-1 grey and slow with pre-winter traffic, and I brought a butternut squash casserole because my mother had asked everyone to bring a side dish. I parked on the street because the driveway was already full. I sat in my car for a few minutes longer than necessary, listening to the CBC, watching my breath fog the windshield. I went inside. The house smelled like roasting turkey and my mother's particular brand of vanilla candle. The noise hit me before I got through the front door. Conversation and laughter and the particular chaos of too many people in a kitchen. My mother kissed me on the cheek and took my coat without really looking at me. My father was deep in conversation with my brother's future father-in-law about the Leafs, which honestly felt like a doomed conversation from the start. I made my way to the kitchen with a casserole and found a spot on the counter for it, and I stood there for a moment, looking around at all these people who were here to celebrate my brother, and I felt, I don't know exactly how to describe it. Not invisible, quite. More like adjacent. Like I was slightly offset from the scene, watching it happen from 1 degree removed. I found a glass of wine in a corner near the back window, and I stayed there for a while, talking to my mother's sister, who has always been kind to me in a quiet, unhurried way that I've been grateful for my whole life. And then dinner was called, and people moved toward the tables, and my brother stood up at the head of the room to say something. He was in good form. He was always in good form for an audience. He thanked everyone for coming. He said something sweet about his fiancée that made her laugh. He acknowledged his friends and colleagues and her family. He had the easy, self-assured delivery of someone who has been told they're charming since childhood and believed it. And then he said, gesturing toward me, "And of course my little sister Adele is here. She drives all the way from Mississauga." He smiled at me. She cleans houses for a living. He said it warmly. That's the part I want you to understand. He wasn't being mean. He thought it was a complete and adequate description of me. He thought he was including me. He laughed, light and easy, and a few people laughed with him, and I saw his fiancée's mother glance at me with a brief, polite, pitying smile, and I stood there with my casserole dish, and I didn't say anything. Not yet. The thing is, I'd heard variations of this my whole life. Not the exact words, but the shape of it. The way my family located me in the world, through what I didn't have, what I hadn't achieved, what I still hadn't figured out. My brother, without meaning to, had just said the quiet part out loud in front of 23 people, at a dinner party where everyone else had been introduced by name and profession and accomplishment. I set the casserole dish down on the table. I picked up my wine glass. I waited for the moment to pass, the way I'd learned to do. But the moment didn't pass, because my brother's future mother-in-law, a woman I'd met once, for approximately 40 minutes, at a coffee my mother had organised in September, leaned across the table and said, kindly and with the best intentions and with all the social grace of someone who had no idea what was happening, "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. It's so hard to find good help these days." And that was the moment, not because it was cruel, but because it was so completely innocently wrong about who I was that something in me shifted, something very quiet and very old. I looked at her. I smiled, and I said, "Actually, I own the company." She blinked. "Borealis Cleaning Services," I said, keeping my voice even, the way you keep your voice even when you're diffusing something carefully. We have 18 employees now. We hold contracts with 4 commercial buildings in the GTA, 2 medical offices, and a private school in Oakville. We did about $1.2 million in revenue last year. The table went quiet. Not dramatically quiet, not movie scene quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a room recalibrates, when people realize they've been holding a picture of something and the picture just changed. My brother was looking at me. My mother was looking at me. I looked at my brother. I should have said something sooner, I said, and I meant it. I wasn't performing grace. I genuinely meant it. I wasn't sure how to bring it up. He opened his mouth, closed it. His fiancée said quietly, "That's really impressive, Adele." I thanked her. I meant that too. The conversation came back slowly, the way noise comes back into a room after someone drops something. My brother's colleague, the one who'd been introduced earlier as being in commercial real estate, leaned over and asked me about my contracts, whether I was looking to expand, whether I'd considered property management facilities. We talked for 20 minutes. He gave me his card. My mother found me in the kitchen afterward, while I was helping clear plates. She stood beside me at the counter, and she didn't say anything for a long moment. She has a way of doing that, waiting until she knows what she wants to say. "I didn't know," she said finally. "I know," I said. "Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the bathroom hallway, the Swiss chalet dinner, the dedicated shelf. I thought about being 19 and standing in a parking lot at 2 in the morning after my first overnight author shift, eating a granola bar out of my jacket pocket and thinking, I'm going to build something. I thought about 4 years of building it without a single person in my family knowing it existed. "I wasn't sure you'd be proud of it," I said. "The cleaning part. I thought you'd hear the word cleaning and stop there." My mother was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," she said. It was a small sentence, and she said it carefully, like she was picking it up with both hands. "I'm sorry if I made you feel that way." She didn't know how to be more specific than that. I don't think she had the language for it yet, but it was real, what she said. I could hear it was real, what she said. I could hear it was real. I told her it was okay, which was partially true. It was okay in the way that a lot of things are okay, because you've done the work of making peace with them on your own, long before anyone else comes around. My brother found me by the door when I was putting on my coat to leave. He hugged me, which surprised me. We're not a particularly huggy family. He held on for a second longer than expected. "I didn't know either," he said. "I know. I think I've been a bit of an idiot." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was such an honest, stripped-down, unperformed thing for him to say. "Yeah," I said. "A bit." He laughed too, and it was strange and real, and I didn't know what came next for us, but I thought, maybe something different than what we'd been. I drove home on the 401 in the dark, the city coming up gradually through the windshield, the radio quiet. I thought about that moment at the table, my voice calm, the casserole dish on the linen tablecloth, 23 people recalibrating. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't rehearsed a speech. I hadn't been waiting for a dramatic moment to unveil myself. I'd just gotten tired, suddenly and completely, of being correctly described by incorrect information. There's a version of this story where I storm out, where I say something devastating, where I give a speech that makes everyone feel exactly as small as I felt. I've seen those stories. I understand the appeal. But that's not what happened. And I think what actually happened was more useful, somehow. Not for them. For me. Because the truth is, I didn't build Borealis to prove something to my family. I built it because I was 23 years old, and I had figured out how to make something work, and the making of it made me feel like myself in a way that nothing else had. The proof of it was incidental. The business was real whether they knew about it or not. That's what I want to say to anyone who's been the second kid, the invisible one, the one introduced as an afterthought at the end of a toast. You probably don't need the recognition as much as you think you do. You've already been doing the work. You've already been building the thing. The moment at the dinner table, that's just math. That's just what happens when years of quiet work meets a room full of people who weren't paying attention. I got a contract with that real estate colleague 2 months later. Facilities management for a commercial complex in Brampton. It's the largest single contract I've ever signed. I told my mother about it over the phone. She asked me questions, good ones, real ones, the kind that meant she was actually listening. She asked about my employees, about the logistics, about whether I liked the work. Do you? She asked. Like it? Yeah, I said. I really do. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I'll probably carry with me for a long time. I should have asked you that years ago. She was right, but she was asking now. And I decided, quietly, without announcement, the way I tend to decide things, that now was enough to work with.